What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Fitz. Um, so today I want to talk about how Larry Elder went on the Breakfast Club and pretty much destroyed them. And this seems to be a pattern when it comes to Republicans or conservatives or whatever going on the Breakfast Club. And they brought the same lady that got destroyed by Vivek, right? I don't know if you guys had saw. Sorry, I got some sweat in my eye. I'm out here at the park, just finished up working out. But they brought the same lady, Teslin Figueroa, I think her name is. The one that Vivek ended up destroying in a previous Breakfast Club interview earlier this year. And it's interesting because she did the same thing in this interview as she did with Vivek. She comes in, she's very aggressive. It's not enough for her to just argue her point and then leave it at that. She has to make little sarcastic remarks. She has to do the head bobbing and do the facial expressions. Just very, I don't even want to say passive aggressive, just very overtly aggressive. And I know people criticize me for saying this and saying, oh, well, you're perpetuating the stereotype that black women are aggressive and all this other stuff. I'm not perpetuating a stereotype. I'm simply making an observation of a black woman I saw on an interview, right? And honestly, I'm going to say that she did make some points that I don't think Larry Elder completely addressed. But I think overall, Larry Elder won the debate because it was 3 against 1. It was DJ Envy, Charlemagne, and this woman, Teslin, against him. He held his ground. He presented facts. So let's get into it, right? What were they talking about? So the interview starts off, kind of, from what I remember, with Charlemagne asking Larry Elder, like, why are you running or whatever, what are you running on? And he starts talking about fatherlessness within the black community and how fatherlessness increases the chances that you will be a criminal, increases the chances that you'll drop out of high school, increases the chances that you will sleep with someone and have a child with them before marriage. All of these different things, pretty much talking about how the black community is suffering because of the lack of fathers in the household. And he's presenting these facts, and he's doing a very good job of articulating these facts. And after all of the statistics, after all the facts Larry Elder sounds off, guess what Charlemagne the God's response was? Guess what his response was? Well, what about white people? Right? That's what he said. What about white people? What do white people do wrong, right? Here Larry Elder is focusing on the black community and focusing on the problems within the black community. And Charlemagne starts talking about, well, what do white people do wrong? Here's why I think that that's a mistake, to focus on what white people do wrong. Because even if you focus on what white people do wrong and you say, you ask ChatGPT what white people do wrong, and ChatGPT tells you, how does that solve the issues within the black community, particularly black fatherlessness? How does that solve it? Let's say that white people had a higher rate of fatherlessness in their community than the black people, right? How would focusing on what white people do in their issues in their community, how would that improve the black community? I've still yet to get an answer about that. And it's interesting because if somebody were to come on the Breakfast Club platform and they were to talk about black issues within the black community and being for black people, blackity, black, black, but they were to echo the sentiments of the Democrat Party, we would not see this type of pushback. It is only pushback when there are conservatives and Republicans that come on the platform and they start talking about these issues. There's this type of pushback that I see. Now, I know that Charlemagne and Teslin and even DJ NB like to say, oh, I'm not Republican, I just, I'm on the outside looking in and blah, blah, blah. But I don't see this type of pushback when there's people that come on and they're saying that they're pro-black and they are, they're speaking in that way, right? Like at one point in the interview, Charlemagne started talking about the Republican Party is against non-conforming gender identities. What the hell does that have to do with fixing the black community, the major issues in the black community? That lets me know that you're trying to peddle an agenda that is contrary or really not focusing on the real issues within the black community. Because fixing non-conforming gender identities is not a major ticket item within the black community. It's just not. The people who are not, gender non-conforming within the black community are a very small minority. Not saying they don't deserve attention or anything like that. But what I am saying is, if we look at the major issues within the black community, that is not one of them. Okay? So let's dive deeper into kind of what Larry Elder was saying as well. What was he talking about? He started talking about how fatherlessness, started talking about how in the black community we really don't have school choice. We are constricted to the education system in which we were born or in which we live, which can definitely hinder the black community. And one thing that I do think Larry Elder did not do a good job of was contesting when they were talking about systems, right? Because he flat out said systemic racism is not an issue, and then they switched it up and said, well, let's talk about systems. It was the system that killed MLK. It's the system that's keeping black people down. It's the system that is causing pretty much unfair treatment and that is responsible for black people not being where they want to be. So let's talk about systems, right? And Larry Elder even, I think he did give a great example of when he said with the Freddie Gray situation in Baltimore, where like the mayor was black, the city council people were black, the chief of staff, and she kept saying, that's not the system, that's not the system, that's not the system. Okay, so then what is the system? What is the system? Because she kept saying, those are just black faces in high places. All right, so then pretty much what you're saying is, if it doesn't matter the race of the person that's in the position, and it doesn't matter about the person in the position because they're part of the system, why do you care so much if Donald Trump is elected? If an individual cannot change a system. Because that was the whole argument, is these are just black people that are in a position within a system. But the system is the overarching structure that dictates the outcomes, not the individual. So if that's the case, why do you care who's president? Why do you care who elected officials are if they're just going to echo the sentiments of the system anyways? Right? See, this is where black people, I think, need to start thinking more critically and analyzing what is actually being peddled to us. Because in their argument, they were saying that black faces in high places do not change systems. They were pretty much saying that if you have an individual that is placed into a system, the system is the thing that's controlling things and you are just there to echo the system. And if that's the case, why do you care who gets elected? Because they're going to follow the system after all. So you shouldn't care if Donald Trump gets elected because he's just a part of the system. You shouldn't care whether Joe Biden gets elected or not. He's just a part of the system. So if everyone is a part of the system and it doesn't matter who's in that position of power, then what's the point? Why are you even on the podcast having the conversation? Doesn't make sense. But let's continue. Okay? Another thing. Let's use a business analogy, because there was something that Charlemagne had said where he was talking about systemic racism, I believe. And okay, I think it went back to the system, and they were talking about people in systems of the individual really doesn't matter. It's all about the system. Okay, well, what I can tell you from a business perspective, because a business is a system, right? A business is a system. So let's look at this from a business perspective, because that's what I'm about. I'm a businessman. So it completely matters who's running the business. When we're talking about outcomes, when we're talking about vision, when we're talking about mission statement, when we're talking about revenue, morale, culture, all of those things, it completely matters who's running the system. And so if I'm running let's say I'm running a real estate business, my system may be cold calling and mailers. Somebody else's system may be door knocking, right? Now, depending on the individual running the system, they may say, hey, do whatever you want to do, or don't do what you want to do. You need to stick to my system, or do it this way, do it that way. But that can directly impact revenue. That can directly impact retention rate, turnover rate, all of these things. So it completely matters who's running the system and who's in charge. I think one thing that they didn't touch on, kind of disappointing, was I think it would have been a more interesting conversation if they would have went into who's supporting the candidate. Those are the people that are really pulling the strings. Who's funding the candidate. And this got me into another thing. And this is what I do not like. When Charlemagne is presented with facts about the black community, and his answer is not to challenge those statistics or even say you're wrong or anything like that, but to say, well, what about white people? What about white people? Oh my God, what about white people? Here's the thing. When you truly want to solve a problem, there has to be a level of accountability. And within the black community, anytime we are held accountable to a certain standard, what do? What about white people? They did. What about white people? So on one hand, you don't want to be compared to white people. Black people are black, we should be unique and all this other stuff. But then on the other hand, every time something happens, you want to compare yourself to a white person. You want to say, well, they do it, so I should be able to do it. Or there's crime in their neighborhoods, why aren't you talking about that? And Larry Elder said, I'm not talking about that because I don't really care what white people are doing. I'm holding black people accountable, right? Imagine you're working at a company and you haven't shown up for 3 days in a row, and you get called into the boss's office and he's like, hey, you haven't showed up for 3 days in a row, I'm gonna have to write you up. And you're like, well, the other companies, people aren't allowed to show up for 3 days in a row, and that's not. It's like, what does that have to do with you? If you're in business and your sales are down, are you gonna start complaining and saying, well, the other company's sales are down? No, you're gonna figure out what you need to do to fix it. And the only way we're going to fix the problems within the black community is to stop listening to people like Charlemagne, who only want to puppet the narrative of the Democrat Party, which is victim blame, victim blame, victim blame. Let's never focus on us. Let's never focus on why we are the problem. Let's never take responsibility and accountability for the things we do. Let's say, oh yeah, we acknowledge the problems within the black community. No, you don't need to just acknowledge them. You need to go hard on them. You need to understand that we are not going to ever be in a position to fix those problems until we take accountability as a community. Not saying we'll take accountability when white people take accountability for what they did to us. Not, oh, we'll take accountability when the perfect amount of sentences and paragraphs and books and movies have been written and played in theaters about slavery and all this other stuff. No, we take accountability, and when we take accountability, we say, hey, look, we are responsible for solving our issues. Focus on the solutions, not the problems, right? Focus on the solutions, not the problems. And all I see whenever it gets down to figuring out solutions, we can't even get to that point because it's like, well, white people, oh my God, white people, right? I couldn't believe that. The dude, Larry Elder, was just like, fatherlessness affects this and affects that. And it's like, can white people not do any wrong to you? That's what he said. Can white people do no wrong to you? Let's say Larry Elder said, no, white people can do no wrong to me. Okay, now what? Now what? Are the issues in the black community fixed? Are they not fixed? I'm curious, how does that actually solve any problems within the black community? It doesn't. It doesn't solve any problems within the black community. And guess what? That's what the Democrat Party wants. And I'm not even a Republican. I can just understand when someone's BSing you. And when you literally, and Larry Elder even called Charlemagne out on the fact that Joe Biden came up to that podcast, which he wouldn't do any other ones, but he goes on the Breakfast Club. He wouldn't do any serious ones, but he goes on the Breakfast Club, understanding that this is how you get in contact with the black community, because we're all about culture and we're not going to pick up a book and actually do any research, but this is how we get our information. Cool. He goes on to this podcast or this platform, radio station, and tells people they're not black if they don't vote for him. Charlemagne didn't challenge him. He didn't call him out. He didn't do anything. He just sat there like a puppet, laughed, tried to brush it off and make it seem like it didn't happen because he has an agenda and he's loyal to the Democrat Party, even though people like him and people like Ted say that they're independent. They go way harder on conservatives. They sit here and act like they're not Democrats or that they're not for Democrats, but yet you rarely hear them talk in the same breath that they do when it comes to Republicans, conservatives, and that's my main problem. If you want to have a more balanced conversation, have a more balanced conversation. But when you sit around and pretend that you're not a Democrat, when it's clear that you have a bias towards them, okay. All right? And I'll wrap it up with this. When I gave it some thought, what systems do black people control? That was a question that got brought up in the interview. What systems do black people control? Let's talk about it. Your life is a system, right? Your life is a system. Routine. When you wake up in the morning and brush your teeth or go to the bathroom, take a shower, eat breakfast, whatever you're doing, your mindset, whatever goals you have that you want to accomplish, that's a system. You're in control of that system. You can choose whether to go to work, whether not to go to work, whether to learn this skill, not learn this skill, do X, Y, and Z, right? That's a system. And so when we're talking about systems, understand that the main system that you are in control of and that you should be focusing on is the system of your life, the system of your family, right? The family is a system. And if you are a parent or you are somebody that's in a position of power within your family, that is your system. So you don't need to be focused on how you can control the Democrat Party or the Republican Party or this overarching system. Focus on the systems within your life that you can control. Focus on those systems. Your body is a system. Are you feeding it correctly? Are you sleeping right? Are you putting good things in your mind? Are you focused on a goal? And are you relentless in achieving that goal and doing whatever it takes, no matter what, as long as it's ethical? Those are the questions you should be asking yourself. Not, oh, why is Joe Biden, or why is this and why is that? You can't control those things. Yes, you can vote, you can do your part, but there's more that you can do within your own life and the systems that fall within your control. And that is what you eat, where you sleep, how long you sleep, where you're working at, how much money you want to make, skill sets, all of these things. How you want to raise your children, all of these things are within your control, at least to a large degree. Maybe not 100%, but there's plenty of things that you can do to start creating a system within your life that's going to yield you the results you want. So when people say, what systems do black people control? Black people control, one, their individual selves, but also, let's talk about macro systems. What agenda or what communal goals do we have to start supermarkets, hospitals, grocery stores, all of these things? We don't have a real black community. We have people who are black that come together to protest and riot or make music or whatever, but we don't have a community in the sense of culture that is pushing towards specific objectives. We do not have that type of community, at least on a national level. You may have it on a state level, you may have it on a city level, but we don't have it on a national level. So when we talk about systems, understand that we could come together and build supermarkets, businesses, do all these things. And there are systems already in place. Let's not pretend there's not. There are black-owned businesses, right? But we have to be more strategic. So I don't think the goal should be to, we don't own the system, whatever the system is in a white majority country. We don't own the system. There is no the system. There's an intricate and complex system made up of many different pieces and parts. And the system, there is a whole system somewhere out there where people can't really identify it. We don't know how it completely operates and how it comes together, but there are parts to the system. And I think the best thing you can try to do in your life is to figure out how you can take your system, your individual self, plug that into a family system, and then take that family system, plug it into a community system, and then take that community system and try to do things on a state level, And then above that, there's really not much that you can do. You can try to, but as it gets further and further and further away from your original system, which is you have less control. So focus on your original system, then focus on your family system, then focus on your community system, then focus on your state system, and then on a national level, do what you can to impact the most people. Start a podcast, create a product, travel around and donate your time, energy, money, etc. So let me know what y'all think. Go check out that Breakfast Club interview with Larry Elder. Let me know if I'm tripping or not. Have more content coming soon. I will start helping. For those of you who don't know, I am a productivity coach. I do help people set goals, increase the value of their time by clarifying their business goals, entrepreneurship goals, and creating customized plans to help you actually start making actionable steps towards achieving your goals. So you can hit me up on Instagram if you want to know more about that. I'll see y'all in the next video.